A new documentary produced by The Intercept invites us to understand our debt in new ways. Take a closer look at debt jubilee, an ancient term for the abolition of debts and rebalancing of power between the rich and the poor. Covering thousands of years of world history in just under 7 minutes, Your Debt is Someone Else's Asset is a call to action. Debtors and their allies will need to get organized to fight for the political and economic transformations we deserve.
It's time regular debtors got a break, too. It's time for a jubilee, the erasure of debts and a rebalancing of power between regular people and elites. It's not a new idea. Jubilee was described in the Bible, and many ancient civilizations had periodic jubilees to avert social and economic collapse. Our earliest recorded histories are stone tablets inscribed with credit ledgers. Nearly as long as debt has existed, debt cancellation has existed too. Throughout history, debtors have risen up to demand relief. In the early 6th century BCE, a debtors' riot helped nudge ancient Athens towards democracy. The reforms, known as the shaking off of burdens, included debt absolution and an end to debt bondage. Something similar happened in ancient Rome after debtors mounted the world's first general strike. In the United States, indebted workers and farmers revolted in the colonial era, and then again during the Great Depression. Later, the call for debt cancellation rang out at Occupy Wall Street. In recent years, striking debtors helped force the government to cancel billions of dollars in student loans. Abolishing medical debt, back rent, and student loans would free up money now spent on debt servicing for other things. People could buy homes and start families, and the racial wealth gap would narrow. Research estimates that canceling student debt alone would boost the economy by up to $108 billion a year and create 1 million jobs.
Here to tell us more about the documentary and take us into what a modern-day Jubilee would look like is The Intercept's Kim Boekbinder. She's co-director and co-writer of the film. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I actually I confess I had no idea that that's what Jubilee means, or that was what its origins are. Was that the idea for this film, to explain to people how this has been a part of, many cultures, ancient cultures, medieval cultures, and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the word Jubilee is also a celebration. It is a freeing from debt bondage. And it's something that we've been calling for in, the United States. And we wanted to make this film that would explain this celebratory freeing from debt, and that this is not a new concept, that for thousands of years, debtors have been demanding their own freedom from debt cancellation or from debt.
And how would this look? I know that when Jubilees began, and I'm a big fan of Jubilees. I've been advocating we need a Jubilee big time here in this world and country. And a lot of that was to prevent kings from being basically murdered by their people, right? The people were rising up. They were becoming so angry that they would maybe storm the castle and capture the king. And that's obviously not something a king would want. Right. So tell us, how would this look here in the U.S. now? Would this be for everybody or people under a certain income threshold?
Well, certainly for federal student loans, it should be for everybody because it helps everybody. And there is this common argument that we should not cancel federal student loans because it might help a few rich people who for some reason would hold student loans. I don't know why. But the system that's really helping rich people right now is the system that we currently have. And more importantly, it's hurting millions of people. So using this argument that we can't cancel federal student debt because it might help some people who don't really need the help is a bad argument, and a bad faith argument being used by people who know it's a bad faith argument.
Are you seeing much traction on the question of medical debt? Because while I agree with you that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that a rich person would have student debt, being rich is that means you don't have to. Your parents are paying for your college, or you're paying for it out of whatever trust you have. But setting that aside, people have that perception, but medical debt, it's not the case. It's not, there's rich people aren't carrying around medical debt. So have you seen a medical debt jubilee getting any traction?
I've seen people be very excited about the debt collective's rolling jubilee that happened some years ago, where they bought up bad medical debts for pennies on the dollar, which you can't do for yourself or people that you know, but you can buy up bad medical debt. And then you can either choose to squeeze those people through shame and harassment to pay you, or you can forgive those debts. And when the rolling Jubilee was happening, it was really popular and people were very excited about it. And I think that is something that people are still excited about, because you haven't been irresponsible if you have medical debt. It's something that has happened to you. And putting a life-saving medication on a credit card is not a choice.
I mean, I think that's kind of explains a little bit of what the difference is between medical debt and student loan debt. I think student loan debt feels much more chosen than people who go into medical debt. Especially if you chose to go to a really fancy or elite or expensive college or university instead of a more affordable one, and you have debt, and I think there's a perception of unfairness that, well, everybody else paid it back or previous people paid it back. They will have to pay it back again in the future, but you are going to get a lucky break that you're going to get yours canceled, and you're still going to have your degree at the end of this. You're not going to have that confiscated. So I think there's a perception that it would be unfair, and that's what distinguishes it from these other categories of debt.
I can understand the emotion that people have that it's unfair, that if you have paid off your student debt, that you feel that, you wish that maybe you had defaulted, or, that you could have had your student debt forgiven, or maybe you feel that you were responsible and paid your student debt and everybody else should be responsible. But this problem is bigger than, what is fair for just a few individuals. This is about millions of people being crushed by debt that could be seen as a choice, but you are often told that you need a degree in this country to make anything above minimum wage being $7.25 an hour. In some places 15, but even 15 is not a living wage. So you're told that you have to have a degree, you have to go into debt, and that's not really a choice.
What do we know about the Jubilees through history, like how they came about, how they were received, what the effect was?
Well, I don't know all of the history about debt jubilees. I learned a lot while working on this video with Astra Taylor, and she is really the one who knows more about that history. But it is true that people throughout history have demanded that their debts be canceled. And it's also, it's sometimes done out of self-preservation by the ruling class because they don't want to be eaten by the poor. And but mostly it has to be demanded by debtors who are, getting to a point where they just can't pay.
Do you think there's a possibility that it creates a bad incentive, though? Because then maybe people will go into debt more, they'll borrow more money because they'll think to themselves, well, the last round of people, when they got so desperate, they had their debts forgiven. So why not do that to myself? I'll get the same deal, and then it creates like a vicious cycle of borrowing beyond one's means.
Well, I'm going to stay focused on student debt because that's really what
Sure.
we're talking about a lot in the country right now. And the Debt Collective, which is a debtors union, is very focused on canceling all federal student loans and also making public universities free for people to go to. So you're not going to need to take out giant student loans. There are people that took out, let's say, $55,000, have paid back as much as they could on their $40,000 salary, and now still owe almost $200,000. And a couple generations ago, school was free. And that is a better system for everybody, wherever you are in society, for more people to be educated and for people to not be crushed by debt.
And that also raises the question, if schooling were to become free again, what happens to everybody who has student loans? Would we then have to automatically forgive them? I also think, to your point, Robbie, what would likely happen if there was a Jubilee? I mean, they don't happen all the time. They're kind of few and far between in history. But the actual banks would be less likely to just kind of willy-nilly give out loans to people, right? They would be more selective probably on how they go about doing it, and whether or not, rather than doing these jumbo home loans that maybe you can't really truly afford, they would actually stick things within your means more so by looking at your finances and being financial experts like they're supposed to be. So that's kind of what I would assume. I love the idea of a full blanket medical medical jubilee because that is kind of a lottery in a lot of ways. Maybe with student loans, maybe a compromise, I don't know, to make the libertarians in the world happy is
I pity someone who took out $200,000 in debt to go into a field where you're going to be making $50,000 at the end.
Right.
You really did not think about that hard enough. You should not have made that choice. That was a really, really, really bad choice. I don't know if the answer is to just waive that. I mean, you should not have made that choice. I don't know. That was a really bad decision. That was like the decision to jump off a cliff. But
I mean, a lot of lawyers go to law school, they take out all this debt, then they go work for the corporate law firm they thought they were going to like, and they hate it. And then they decide, oh, crap, I really want to be a public defender and do something good with my degree. And then, so they weren't really making the choice.
And we need people in those jobs. Right.
And
we have designed an economy that has these jobs that don't pay much money, that need to be filled by people with expensive educations. And so we can blame the individuals who got into that situation, but
I'm not blaming them. I feel sorry for them, but yeah.
we built
not
the
if there's a debt jubilee.
But Kim,
but you still think it's their responsibility, and it's.
I do.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah, that's the root of our disagreement. But we really appreciate your perspective, and the documentary looks really interesting. So thank you for talking to us about it.
Thank you so much.
And we'll be back with more Rising right after this.